Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, the Un Compadres. Today's episode is brought to you by Kate, Ella,
Chloe, and Christina.
And we're going to be talking to you about our watershed practicum field trip led by Doctors Stephen Fosnot and Sunshine Swetnam. So, for a brief background overview, the watershed that we traveled through was the Uncompahgre River watershed, and we visited all kinds of professionals and sites along the way. So the Uncompahgre is located in southwest Colorado, situated in the San Juan Mountains, and it is a high elevation watershed that flows into the Gunnison and then into the Colorado River, which then flows into the Gulf of California. So and then Chloe is going to start us off with some impactful experiences we had at Ridgway Dam.
So one of our stops along the Uncompahgre watershed was Ridgway Reservoir. The reservoir was built in the 1900s from locally sourced materials like larger rocks and clay, and the clay was there to prevent leaking. And then what wasn't sourced from the area is made of concrete. And this reservoir holds 84,210 acre feet, which is essentially 84,210 football fields from one end zone to the other team's 10-yard line, and then that field 1 foot deep. And today, this reservoir acts as a water resource for agriculture. It's an area for outdoor recreation. It provides power, which Christina will talk more about later, and it's a really big fish habitat. And the Uncompahgre River and snowmelt fill this reservoir. And the level of the reservoir is controlled by the 200-foot Ridgway Dam, which outflows back into the Uncompahgre.
Yeah, so like Chloe mentioned, the Ridgway Dam produces hydropower. This is a secondary use of the dam, though. Its primary use is for resources for farms and municipalities. This hydropower plant is essentially two generators, one smaller generator that runs at about 30 to 60 CFS and produces 0.8 megawatts of electricity, and then they also have a larger one that runs at about 120 CFS that produces about 8 megawatts. According to the Colorado Small Hydro Association, the CO2 removal because of the hydropower is equivalent to about removing 4,400 cars from the road. And in addition to this, they recently just put fish screens in their spillway. So the spillway is there for emergencies. Instead of overtopping the dam, the water will go through the spillway. These fish screens were put in place because there were smallmouth bass that were introduced in the reservoir. And these bass are not in the downstream river, and a lot of people do not want them there because they'll overtake the trout habitat. So now that they've put the fish screens in, that they won't have to worry about overtopping the spillway, which has been nice. And now a quick word from our sponsor.
I'm crazy.
Hey there, bud. Do you need a place to sit on the ground?
Yeah.
Oh, buy Crazy Creek.
Oh.
It's the chair that can take you anywhere.
I'm feeling crazy for Crazy Creek.
Now back to Kate.
All right. So another area that we stopped at on our journey through the Uncompahgre was Ela Farms, an organic farm near Grand Junction, Colorado. So what I'm going to talk about are the differing irrigation strategies that Ela Farms used to manage their crops. So Steve, one of the owners of the farm that we talked to, said that before they were an organic farm, they used flood irrigation, and that really got them stuck in this kind of feast and famine water cycle where they either had so much water they didn't know what to do with it, or like literally no water at all. So they moved from flood irrigation to drip irrigation, and that was a much more efficient way to give small amounts of water consistently throughout the season. However, to be able to provide that water, they had to pull water from reservoirs upstream, and those reservoirs are managed by the River Creek Water Reservoir Company. And this is a coalition of all of these small, like really tiny reservoirs that were dug by individual farmers and were used to just all be run individually. But Steve and his community decided to consolidate them into one company, and they all manage that water together and decide when the water goes downstream based on water rights. And it really is a collaborative effort, which was kind of a theme throughout our trip, that water can be a source of conflict, but with like hard work and collaboration, it can also be managed very effectively. So yeah, and Ella's going to talk about some more parts of Ela Farms.
Yeah. One of the things that I found really interesting about Ela Farms was we got to see more of like a systems perspective of water and water management. So farming has a lot of moving parts because it is an ecosystem. So when it comes to soil and water use, like they're looking at things all the way down to like cover crops, because how you manage like these various species and the timing and the planting and the harvesting of these things all affect the soil care, which in turn affect the crops. This is because like ecosystems are just this interconnected to the point where like small changes will affect everything in the system, and peak productivity means considering all of these variables. It also means sometimes just calling it good. So, he talked a bit about having like a really low amount of nitrogen in the soil for what they have been putting in, which is objectively like a huge amount of nitrogen. But because so many things could be impacting this, they just had to move on, because it really could be hundreds of things affecting the soil in such a way. This interconnectivity also means fragility. So Colorado's farming industry is based on microclimates, meaning that there's this one pocket in the middle of the mountains that is capable of growing crops. But because it's so small, it's highly affected by climate change, and these microclimates are only getting smaller and smaller. So like the last thing I wanted to think of when talking about Ela Farms is like, how productive are they at this soil and plant and timing and looking at all these factors. And they said that they're 90% efficient at water seepage, their soil is, from rain. And this is because of the cover crops and like highly effective soil. So they're doing a really good job of making like all of their components work together.
Well, those are just a couple snapshots of the field trip that we took. Thanks for tuning in, and have a beautiful afternoon.